I pressed the crumpled receipts into her hand and said, "You owe me, Lynn." My voice echoed weirdly under the makeshift roof of the Benthan market stall, and shoppers drifted past us, eyes flicking between my outstretched palm and the rows of plastic fans overhead. She leaned back against the wooden frame, arms crossed, calm as a monk, and murmured, "Business delays, Anna." My heart thumped so loud I half expected the other vendors to hear it. "Business delays," I repeated, voice rough. "You said I'd have my pocket money by Monday." She shrugged, lips painted the soft pink of a summer sunset. "Family emergencies," she said. "You understand." A bead of sweat slid down my temple, and I realized my cheeks were burning hotter than the midday sun. I did understand too well. I'd given her every allowance, every dong she'd asked for, the bus fare, the electricity bills, the deposit on her brother's medical treatment. I'd thought I was her partner, her friend. Now I stood here, exposed, holding evidence that my devotion had become her payroll. "I'm not her family," I told myself, voice small, but she heard it. She tilted her head like she heard a joke only she understood. "Anyu's getting upset," she said softly, voice almost sweet. I wanted to believe that instead of anger, I was just a silly old man who'd lost track of time. "Come back tomorrow," she said, hands slipping the receipts into her purse. "I'll have it then, okay?" "No," I said, every syllable deliberate. "Today." My heart squeezed against my rib cage. Memories flashed. The day she taught me how to say "I love you" in Vietnamese, her laughter over street coffee, the way she tucked my arm through hers on our scooter rides. I swallowed and asked, "Do you even care?" She looked away, scanning the market crowd. Tourists snapping photos, street vendors hawking knockoff sunglasses, children darting between legs. When she met my eyes again, her gaze was slick, practiced. "Of course I care," she said. "Just not today." The market noise blurred as a rush of shame flooded me. Shame for trusting her promises, shame for believing a stranger's soft-spoken words more than my own instincts. I balled my fists, nails digging into my palms, tasting metallic fear. "You said partner," I whispered. She shrugged once more. "Words are easy." I felt tears sting but blinked them away. A silent sting cracked through me as the truth settled. I was nobody's partner. I was her bank. Lukewarm anger burned into cold resignation. I turned, tucking my head under my shoulder to hide the shake in my spine, and I walked away, leaving Lynn framed by the crowded market and the empty promise of tomorrow's payment. Every step felt like shedding layers of who I thought I was. The generous retiree, the hopeful traveler, the doting boyfriend. By the time I reached the street's edge, my reflection shimmering in a motorbike mirror, I saw only a man stripped bare by his own kindness. My pride was gone, replaced by a hollow so deep, I wondered if I'd ever feel full again. So I stood, there outside the market roar, chest tight, and inhaled the humid air. Not because it was fresh, but because I needed to remind myself I was still breathing. I still remember the click of the Google search bar as I typed, "Best places to retire abroad." My vision blurred by tears I refused to shed. My friend Bob's call came at 2 a.m. "You sure about this, Jim?" he asked. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, voice barely steady. "I'm tired of this silence, Bob. The walls are too loud with memories." A long pause followed. "All right," he said, "but you're actually going through with selling the Camry." I pressed, my hands into my lap. "Yes, it goes tomorrow morning." He cleared his throat. "You have a plan?" I pointed at the search results. Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia. Places where my savings might stretch farther than my grief. "I'm booking a one-way ticket," I said. "No return." On the line, Bob let out a breath that rattled my heart. "Just promise you'll call if it's a mistake." My thumb hovered over the buy button until I whispered, "I'll call when I feel ready." The next morning I met the rental agent at my empty house. She looked at me with polite curiosity and asked, "How long will you rent?" I handed her the keys. "Month to month," I said, voice steady. She nodded and backed away as if afraid to disturb my resolve. I unlocked the front door one last time and ran my hand along the banister. Smooth oak that once felt warm under Mary's palm. Now it felt foreign and cold. At the dealership, a smiling clerk handed me the cash and remarked, "Good luck on your travels." I managed a nod and swallowed the lump in my throat. When I walked out, the lot looked too vast, my life too small. At the airport, humidity hit me like a curtain. My ticket said Ho Chi Minh City in bold letters and a departure. Time that felt like a promise. I shuffled through the terminal, clutching my passport like a lifeline until a foreign voice called, "Next!" I stepped onto the plane and slid into my seat, turning to catch one last glimpse of the tarmac lights. I muttered, "Here we go," and thought of Mary's smile. "I hope you're proud," I said to the empty seat beside me. Hours later, I stumbled off the turboprop into the noisy chaos of Tan Son Nhat Airport. A customs officer glanced at my bag and asked, "Chuyenji Dai? Long trip?" I nodded. "Yes." He stamped my passport with a crisp thud and handed it back. I inhaled the humid air and tried to steady my breath. Outside, the sky was bruised purple, and I felt a flutter of hope. A taxi driver hustled me toward his car, windows down, honking horns all around. I sank into the seat and told him, "Oolong Cafe, District 1. He grunted and I shut my eyes against the neon chaos. My heart pounded with equal parts fear and excitement. Later, at the tiny guest house, the owner looked at me like a curious child and said, "Welcome back." I forced a smile. "Thank you." She handed me a nearly spotless room key and asked, "How long stay?" I imagined forever. "Indefinitely," I said, and the word landed like a stone in my chest. That night, I lay on a firm mattress, the fan humming overhead. My phone buzzed with a text from Bob. "You there?" I typed, "Yes, I'm here." His reply came swift. "Be safe." I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "I will be." In that moment, I believed the humid air could wash away my past, that every motorbike roar was a heartbeat telling me I was alive again. I remembered Mary's laugh in the yard back home, and let a single tear slide down my cheek. "It's just me now," I said softly. My fingers moved to call my daughter, but I hesitated, afraid to admit I was chasing hope halfway around the world. Instead, I set the phone aside and drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of street markets and new beginnings, unaware that salvation could taste like sugarcane juice one moment and betrayal the next. I slid onto the plastic stool and watched steam curl from our cups as Lynn set down 2 mugs of strong, sweet coffee with a gentle smile. She said, "Repeat, chape suaja." I cleared my throat and managed, "Kafe suada." She laughed, a bright musical sound that made my chest tighten, and leaned forward to correct my tone. "Chape suaja," she repeated slowly, eyes warm. I swallowed and tried again, startled by how every syllable felt like a promise. "Chafe suaja," I said, and her grin widened. "Good job," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. My heart fluttered as I replied, "Your accent is perfect." She cocked her head. "You try hard, I help you." Her voice was soft but firm, and in that moment I believed it. We spent the morning huddled over that chipped table, her patient corrections guiding me through simple phrases. I asked, "How do you say thank you?" She smiled and said, "Come on," then waited as I stumbled through it. "Come on," I said, and she clapped lightly. "Closer," she said. My face heated under the cafe's dim bulbs. I laughed, brushing hands with her as I reached for my cup. Outside, motorbike horns and sizzling woks stitched together the soundtrack of Saigon's streets. I asked, "Do you ride?" She shrugged and said, "Sometimes." I pictured her flipping onto the back of a scooter, wind catching her laughter. I said, "Take me." She paused, studying me with those dark eyes, then shook her head. "Not today." Silence settled between us, and I felt a flicker of doubt. Why not today? But I masked it with a smile and said, "Next time." She pressed her lips together and nodded, her expression unreadable. After coffee, she led me out into the sticky afternoon and hailed a bright red Exiom driver. As I climbed onto the back, She held my hand and said, "Hold tight." Her confidence steadied my nerves. The driver weaved through traffic, and I laughed, adrenaline racing, as we shot past markets and painted walls. Lynn pointed to a tray of banh mi stalls and asked, "Hungry?" I shrugged, and she ordered for me pate, cilantro, pickled carrots. I bit into the sandwich and moaned with delight. She laughed again and said, "See, best food." Her excitement was contagious, and I said, "You know all the secrets." She shrugged, eyes bright. "I live here." That simple truth felt intimate, like an invitation into her world. Later, she taught me how to haggle at a spice store. She whispered, "Jia bao niao?" "How much?" And I repeated it, voice shaky. The vendor quoted a price, and she narrowed her eyes. 15? I whispered. "Moi lum?" She shook her head. 10. My heart thudded as I said, "Moi?" She nodded approvingly. "Good." I handed over the money and felt a surge of pride. We walked on, our shoulders brushing, and I thought, I'm not a tourist. I'm part of this moment. Back at the cafe, she asked, "Have you ever loved like this?" Her question caught me off guard. I stared at my coffee and said, "I love my Maria," voice tight. I paused, looking up at her, but she's gone. Her hand covered mine, soft and fleeting. "I'm sorry," she said. Silence stretched, thick as humid air. My throat tightened, and I whispered, "Thank you." That moment felt like the hinge of my world, her sympathy and the warmth of her hand. I blinked back tears and forced a laugh, saying, "Enough sadness for one day." She smiled again, but I sensed a flicker of something in her eyes. Concern or calculation, I couldn't tell. As I walked her home later, I asked, "Why teach me?" She turned, shadows playing on her face. "Because I like your company." My chest fluttered. I said, "I like yours." She bit her lip and said, "You are kind." I searched her face for hidden meaning, but found only a quiet sincerity. Yet a small voice inside me whispered, "Be careful." That night, I sat on the balcony of my guest house, the city lights flickering below, and replayed every laugh, every lesson, every brush of skin. I told myself I was learning a language, but deep down I felt I was learning something more dangerous. I sipped my remaining coffee and whispered, "I'm falling." My reflection stared back at me, bright-eyed and hopeful and utterly naive. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and heard Lynn's soft voice before I saw her. "Ande Chua, are you up yet?" And I pushed aside the thin curtain to find her silhouetted against the dawn. She handed me a wrench and said, "The AC makes noise." I knelt beside the unit, feeling sweat bead on my forehead as I tightened a screw. "Good work," she said, eyes bright. I stood and grinned, brushing my shirt sleeve. "Anything for you." The guest house smelled of fresh paint and salty air. We unlocked rooms together, and each time a tourist stepped inside, they smiled at how bright and clean everything looked. One couple cooed, "Very beautiful," and I felt my chest swell. Lynn slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "My hero." I laughed softly and said, "Just doing my part." She tilted her head and asked, "Will you help me paint the balcony later?" I nodded, delighted. Over breakfast, a backpacker complained the Wi-Fi dropped out. I opened my laptop and reset the router, murmuring, "Sorry about that." Lynn watched me, pride shining in her eyes. "You are amazing," she told me, tracing a finger along the edge of my coffee cup. I felt my identity shift, no longer a stranger in a foreign land, but her partner, her co-founder. Later, I met with a local sign painter and negotiated a new wooden sign for the guest house. We stood in the workshop as the painter sketched bold letters, and Lynn translated my questions into quick Vietnamese. She glanced at me and said, "You make good choices," I said, "only because you guided me." Her warm laugh felt like praise I'd longed for. That afternoon, I hauled bags of cement for a small patio renovation. My muscles ached, but I told myself the pain was proof I belonged. A neighbor stopped and asked, "An Chak Chu? Are you sure?" And I replied without hesitation, "Yes." She watched me, admiration in her gaze, and I felt a spark of validation. In the evening, Lynn and I arranged ferns and lanterns in the courtyard. She stepped back and said, "It looks like a dream." I brushed dirt from her cheek and replied, "We built this dream." Her soft "thank you" sent a thrill through me. A week later, I spotted past due notices on the table. I held them up and said, "We're behind again." Lynn's expression flickered. "Money tight this month," she explained. I forced a smile. "It's okay." My heart sank, but I told myself love would fix this. At dinner, we shared a cheap noodle bowl under a single bulb. I asked, "Why isn't the booking site updated?" She shrugged. "Busy with paperwork." I nodded, believing her. She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I trust you." My chest ached. Her trust was my raison d'etre. 2 months in, every dollar I spent felt worth her gratitude. Each time I updated the guest list or patched a leak, I heard her whisper, "My hero." In those moments, I felt invincible, until I found another past due notice tucked beneath her pillow. She watched me read it, eyes downcast, and whispered, "It's temporary." I sighed and leaned into her. "I'll cover it." That small admission crystallized my transformation. I wasn't here for retirement. I was here to prop up her dreams. Yet I believed I was growing stronger, more alive than ever. I was unloading a crate of fresh linens when Mrs. Huang from next door called out, "And John, the rent is late again?" I turned, linen in hand, and forced a laugh. "Just a day behind," I said, wiping sweat from my brow. She frowned and asked, "Everything okay?" I nodded, though my heart thumped. Late rent was just the start. That night, I opened my journal and wrote in neat cursive, "Dodged 3 calls from Lynn's supplier. Must ask about cement payment." My pen hovered over the page, and I wondered what family emergencies meant this time. The next morning, I sat across her at the kitchen table, sun glinting off her coffee cup, and asked, "Lynn, I got a text about the electricity bill. Why wasn't it covered as you said?" She blinked, lips parting in surprise. "I thought I paid it," she murmured, head tilting. "Family emergency, remember." I pressed my palms to the table and said quietly, "You said last month was settled." Her eyes flicked away, catching on the mortar dust on the counter. "Things slipped my mind," she said softly, voice steady. I tasted bitterness but forced a smile. "It's okay, just let me know next time." She reached across and brushed my hand. "I'm sorry." That night, I replayed her apology. In my head, warm but missing something. My inner voice whispered, "She's hiding more." 2 days later, I walked through the guest house halls and found another notice from the water company stuck beneath a vase. I held it up and called, "Lynn?" She looked up from her laptop and said, "Oh, that's nothing." I said, "Nothing costs money." Her eyes rounded. "I'll handle it." I nodded, but inside I felt the jitter of doubt. Over lunch with a local contractor, I casually mentioned renovations. He asked, "Who's covering materials?" I said, "I am." He paused. "She didn't tell me?" I forced a chuckle. "She forgot." He looked unconvinced. Back at home, my phone buzzed with a message from Lynn. "Need cash for family. Wire. Me 5 million VND." I stared at the screen, chest tightening. I tapped call. She answered on the second ring. "Thanks for always being there, Anne." Her gratitude was sincere, or so I told myself. I replied, "Of course. Just send me details." As she rattled off account numbers, I scribbled them on a scrap of paper. My pen shook. Later, I dialed the bank and arranged the transfer, telling the teller, "Put it through immediately." I hung up and whispered to the empty room, "I love you." My voice cracked, and I blinked back tears, because I believed I was helping the woman I loved, not funding an endless string of excuses. That evening, I stood by the guest house balcony, the city's neon glow below, and asked myself if love was enough to cover every missed payment, every vague apology. I thought of her quick smile, how easily she slipped between warmth and distance. In my journal I wrote, "Hope is my prison and my salvation." I closed it and called out, "Lynn?" She emerged from the courtyard kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. "Dinner's ready," she said, voice light. I looked at her and said, "I worry." She paused, apron tied, and replied, "Don't." Her single word felt like a command. I breathed in, tasting the steam from her noodle soup. "I trust you," I said, even though doubt was a fist tightening in my gut. We ate in silence under a single overhead bulb. My spoon hovered over the broth as I watched her, her back straight, her hair loose, and I thought, love made me blind. After dinner, I found more notices, this time from a phone company. Stacked on the nightstand, I held them and said, "This can't keep happening." She met my eyes in the lamp's glow and answered softly, "It's a rough season." I closed the gap between us and said, "I want to help, but I need honesty." Her gaze dropped, and when she spoke, her voice wavered. "I'm trying." I believed her, because denial felt more comforting than the truth. Lying in bed, I pressed the papers to my chest and whispered into the dark, "I love you more than my own peace." A single tear slid down my cheek, warming the collar of my shirt. In that moment, I realized my hope was binding me to a lie. Yet I refused to let go. That's how deeply I was invested and how far I was willing to fall. I was leaning against the railing of the courtyard when a British couple wandered in, passports in hand, and the woman asked, "Excuse me, is this Ms. Lin's homestay number 2? My heart slammed against my ribs. "Second one?" I frowned. "Yes," the man said. "She owns this place and another just down the road." My world tilted. I forced a nod and mumbled, "Thank you," as they slipped away. Every step back to Lynn felt heavier than the last. I found her in the kitchen, humming while she washed dishes. I said, "Lynn, a guest mentioned another homestay you co-own." She froze, dishcloth in hand, and blinked. "I thought you... I knew." My voice cracked. "You thought I knew." I waited for her to laugh it off, but she swallowed hard. "It's easier this way," she said. I pressed my lips together and pointed a trembling finger. "Easier how?" She turned off the tap and stepped closer, water dripping from her sleeves. "Managing one place was too much," she explained. "I needed something smaller to oversee, while you handled the beachfront. Betrayal stung sharper than any sunburn I'd suffered here." I steadied my voice. "So you created 2 businesses and hid one from me?" Her eyes flickered between guilt and defiance. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I needed independence." I shook my head, disbelief and anger warping my features. "I poured my savings into your dream, every nail, every paint bucket, while you built a franchise behind my back." She bit her lip and said, "I thought you'd understand." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Understand? I thought we were partners, equal partners." She reached out, but I stepped back. "I was just financing your side project." My chest ached with the weight of her words. She closed her eyes and said, "You're more than a bank to me." I swallowed, tasting the metallic tang of tears. "Then why hide it?" she exhaled, shoulders slumping. "Because I was afraid you'd leave." Silence packed the room tight. I watched her struggle for composure, her breath catching. I said, "You lied because you feared my reaction. But you forgot I deserve honesty." She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I'm sorry." My voice softened, confusion bleeding through anger. "What do you want from me now?" She stepped toward me, voice quavering. "I want us to rebuild together." I closed my eyes, replaying the markets I'd fixed, the rooms I'd painted, the nights I'd stayed up worrying about bills I didn't even know existed. I said, "I need time." Her hand hovered in the air before dropping to her side. "Take all you need," she whispered. I turned away, breath shallow, heart pounding. In the dead quiet of the courtyard, my reflection in the sliding glass looked back at me, a man undone by the truth he never saw coming. I gripped the railing until my knuckles whitened, whispering into the night, "I trusted you." The words echoed hollowly. Behind me, Lynn's footsteps faded, and I realized our dynamic had shattered. I was no longer her partner, but her disillusioned benefactor. Every promise of partnership, nails hammered, ledgers balanced, felt like a lie built on top of another. As the moonlight traced her silhouette disappearing into the darkness, I knew this twist would echo through the rest of my days. I gave her everything, and she repaid me with deception. I arrived at the guest house before dawn, suitcase wheeling, over the cracked concrete, and realized something was off the moment I reached for my keyring. The padlock on the front gate was new, its metal cold and unyielding beneath my fingers. I knocked lighter than I intended and said, "Lynn?" No answer. I dug in my pocket for my phone and saw 0 bars. I'd forgotten to charge it. I cursed under my breath, yanked out the battery pack and plugged in the charger as quickly as I could, but the screen stayed black. My pulse hammered in my ears as I stepped under the narrow awning, the morning air thick with the scent of salt and stale coffee. I climbed the 3 steps to the lobby and pressed my palm to the wooden door. Locked. "Lynn!" I yelled, louder. No footsteps, no voices, only the distant hiss of a motorbike. I tried the guest house side door and found it sealed, too. Its lock fresh. Panic knotted my stomach as I circled the building, dust rising under my shoes. I found the old night guard, Dow, curled in a hammock by the side entrance. His eyes fluttered open and he mumbled, "Chu John?" as if he recognized me. I crouched beside him and asked, "Where is she?" Dow shook his head, voice hoarse. "She go no say." My breath caught. "She left." He blinked and slid out of the hammock, pointing to the desk where a single sandal lay. It was mine. No, thin straps and embroidered silk, hers. I picked it up, disbelief slamming into me like a wave. "Why her sandal?" I whispered. Dow shrugged, gesturing at the empty doorway. My world narrowed to that one shoe, like a clue in a crime scene. I stumbled back to the lobby, sandals echoing on the tile, and crumpled onto the front desk, clutching her slipper in both hands. My mind raced, the past due notices, the late-night wires, the empty apologies, all of it hurtling toward this moment. I whispered, "She stole everything, including my trust." I tried my phone again, still dead. I slammed my fist on the desk and tasted metal fear on my tongue. I ran through the empty rooms, their beds made, towels folded, as if I could find her behind a curtain. My footsteps echoed hollowly. I flung open the door to her bedroom and felt my heart lurch. Her suitcase was gone. The pocket of my favorite shirt stuffed with photographs vanished, and the window wide open, breeze riffling the curtains like a mocking laugh. I sank to the floor and pressed my forehead to the cool tile, mind flashing back to her soft "I love you," her "my hero," and her whispered "I need you." The brute of the sea came through the walls, indifferent. I pulled myself up, sandals forgotten, and asked the empty room, "Why?" No answer. My voice cracked as I gathered her abandoned sandals, her slippers, her half-used shampoo bottle. Each item a testament to her vanishing act. I stuffed them into my bag, hands shaking, and stumbled outside into the courtyard, where the jasmine vines draped silently. I pressed my back to a wall and slid down until I sat, knees to chest, the morning sun creeping over the horizon. I asked myself, am I awake? But the betrayal felt too real. I blinked back tears, tasting salt and shame. "How could I be so blind?" I whispered. Then I stood, sandals in hand, and marched to the guard hut. Dow was gone. I called out, "Dow." No response. I headed to the main road, hoping to find him, but the street was empty. My phone flickered to life as I crossed the road. 1 bar. I dialed her number and held the phone to my ear, breath held. Ring, ring, voicemail. I left a message. "Lynn, answer me. You can't do this." My voice trembled, no callback. I tried again. Voicemail. I stared at the tiny screen and felt a hollow ache. I texted, "Where are you?" and pressed send even though I knew nothing would come. The early sun seared my shoulders as I sank onto a curb, the weight of her deception pressing me down. I remembered her smile when I wired her money, her warm "thank you," and I felt rage and sorrow intertwine. I whispered, I was more than a partner. I was her bank. My eyes stung and I bit my lip until I tasted blood. I stood, clutching her sandal, and walked back to the guest house gate, every step heavy with regret. At the gate, I paused, sandal dangling from my fingers, like a cruel talisman. I whispered, "I trusted you." The lock clicked behind me as I pushed it open, echoing like a sentence. I carried her slipper inside and dropped it on the desk, then collapsed into the chair behind it, head in hands. The morning light streamed through the dusty window, illuminating the empty lobby. I sat for hours, phone in hand, heart hollow, until at last I whispered into the silence, "I have nothing left to lose." The tide of betrayal rose within me, and I closed my eyes, feeling both devastated and unmoored, a man undone by the one he loved. I fold the torn photo against my chest and gaze out at the Saigon Park pond where lanterns drift along the water like lost promises. I hold the camera steady and say, "I bought a life, but she sold me a lie." My voice cracks, and I press the photo flat, smoothing ragged edges with my thumb. I remember the day it was taken, her laughter echoing under the banyan tree, sunlight dancing on her hair. Now that light feels like a memory someone else recalled. I tuck the photo into my jacket pocket and whisper, "I was her project, not her partner." A jogger slows nearby and I force myself to breathe past the tightness in my chest. I think of every nail I hammered, every bill I paid on her behalf, and I taste the bitter truth. I lost more than money. I lost my innocence. I lift my head and say to the camera, "She taught me how to love and how to fall." I pause and let the humid air carry my words. But I've learned to stand on my own. My fingers curl around the bench slat, knuckles whitening as I replay the moments when I ignored red flags, her diverted gaze, her practiced apologies. I hear her voice, "I need you," and it feels like a confession and a command. Tears sting my eyes, but I blink them away and continue, "I won't chase her into the dark." I reach into my pocket and touch the photo's soft corner, feeling both loss and relief. A child's laugh drifts from a nearby playground, and I let myself smile, a small, reluctant curve. "Tomorrow," I say, "I'll build something new." My reflection shimmers in the glass of a nearby light post as dusk settles. I stand, folding the photo with deliberate care, and place it back in my pocket, where its ragged tears can't slip away. My legs feel unsteady, but I straighten, chest rising with resolve. I face the camera and whisper, "This is where I reclaim my life." The world blurs around me, motorbike horns, distant shouts, but my focus narrows to the path ahead. I take a step forward, then another, each one lighter than the last, like shedding old skin. I pause at the bench's edge and glance back once, only once, before turning away. I lift my chin to the sky, inhaling the promise of a new day. "Goodbye," I murmur, not to her but to the man I was. My silhouette merges with the city's neon glow as I walk toward a future uncharted, but mine to shape. The camera captures my disappearing figure, and I imagine this confession live in someone else's hands, inspiring another to wake up, fold their own torn truths, and stand again. In that quiet moment, I feel both broken and whole, devastated by what I lost, yet ready to build what I choose. And as the lens blinks off, I know I've finally let go. I fold the torn photo against my chest and gaze out at the Saigon Park pond where lanterns drift along the water like lost promises. I hold the camera steady and say, "I bought a life, but she sold me a lie." My voice cracks, and I press the photo flat, smoothing ragged edges with my thumb. I remember the day it was taken, her laughter echoing under the banyan tree, sunlight dancing on her hair. Now that light feels like a memory someone else recalled. I tuck the photo into my jacket pocket and whisper, "I was her project, not her partner." A jogger slows nearby, and I force myself to breathe past the tightness in my chest. I think of every nail I hammered, every bill I paid on her behalf, and I taste the bitter truth. I lost more than money. I lost my innocence. I lift my head and say to the camera, "She taught me how to love and how to fall." I pause and let the humid air carry my words. But I've learned to stand on my own. My fingers curl around the bench slat, knuckles whitening, as I Replay the moments when I ignored red flags. Her diverted gaze, her practiced apologies. I hear her voice. I need you. And it feels like a confession and a command. Tears sting my eyes, but I blink them away and continue. I won't chase her into the dark. I reach into my pocket and touch the photo's soft corner, feeling both loss and relief. A child's laugh drifts from a nearby playground, and I let myself smile, a small, reluctant curve. Tomorrow, I say, I'll build something new. My reflection shimmers in the glass of a nearby light post as dusk settles. I stand, folding the photo with deliberate care, and place it back in my pocket where its ragged tears can't slip away. My legs feel unsteady, but I straighten, chest rising with resolve. I face the camera and whisper, "This is where I reclaim my life." The world blurs around me, motorbike horns, distant shouts, but my focus narrows to the path. Ahead, I take a step forward, then another, each one lighter than the last, like shedding old skin. I pause at the bench's edge and glance back once, only once, before turning away. I lift my chin to the sky, inhaling the promise of a new day. "Goodbye," I murmur, not to her but to the man I was. My silhouette merges with the city's neon glow as I walk toward a future uncharted, but mine to shape. The camera captures my disappearing figure, and I imagine this confession live in someone else's hands, inspiring another to wake up, fold their own torn truths, and stand again. In that quiet moment, I feel both broken and whole, devastated by what I lost, yet ready to build what I choose. And as the lens blinks off, I know I've finally let go.